Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon. JP, the Honorable JP Marzullo, is once again not with us because he's out fighting communists. He's thrown them back over the state line, back into Massachusetts where they belong. And we'll see him next time. As always, Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by, I can't talk tonight because I'm so excited. Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, the oldest sports shooting club in the state of New Hampshire. We have open membership, unlike other sports shooting clubs. We do not have a waiting list. WilsonHillPistol.org, if you're watching this online, the website is at the bottom of the screen. Folks, I've hosted this show for 6 or 7 years now, or co-hosted the show with my old friend Gary until his passing. And we have a format on this show where essentially January through October, November, we talk about current events. We talk about local politics. We try to focus on New Hampshire politics and what's going on at the State House. And when there are big events going on nationally, we talk about those events. But when we get into the holidays, when we get into November, December, we have this pattern where we kind of shut down that type of cycle and we move to talking about the homeless situation here in Manchester. We talked like we did last week with the Liberty House. And what is very, very quickly became my favorite show of the year for several different reasons. We have a returning guest, and I love it when he joins us because it is the last show of the year. We're going to take a break here. It's our Christmas show. We're going to talk about Christmas, and we're going to welcome back Pastor Walter Muddy.
Hey,
Walter, how are you doing?
It's good to be here.
It's good to see you. I really mean it. This is your microphone has come off here. This has become my favorite show every year. I look forward to it all the time. Like I said, because it's Christmas, because it's our last show, and because I get to see you and talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to be here.
So
and to get caught up. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back. I appreciate that. It makes me feel honored.
Like I said, it's become a tradition. I mean, you've been our Christmas show for 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
And I hope you keep coming back.
Well, thank you.
For as long as you can. So,
thank you. Yeah.
For as long as I'm doing the show, at least. So tell us what's going on. I mean, again, you were on the show last year. We always talk about some of the same subjects, but you currently do a lot of ministry in prisons. Or in
that's part
prison,
of my.
or that's part of what you do.
Yeah, that's part of what I do. Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing, right? And you have to switch prisons recently, or
That's correct too. Yes, and there's some political discussion there.
really? Do
yeah.
they because of what you're doing in the prison, or is it like they don't allow? I mean, prison ministry is something that's been around for decades, and to have to be told to leave one and find another, that I mean, we don't have to discuss it.
No,
but
it's
it just seems like if you're volunteering your time, why is it not?
It doesn't make sense what happened to MCI Concord in Massachusetts. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, Walter Muti is my name. I unfortunately live in Massachusetts, according to Joshua. I'm an independent Christian missionary to New England, and for many years, as you know, I lived in Venezuela, South America. But we were asked to leave the country. We were kicked out of the country in 2005. President Hugo Chavez, the then current president, who was democratically elected, but he then quickly went socialist.
He ruled it as a communist dictator.
Yes, he
socialist
did, as a dictator.
Yep.
And so the mission organization that I was with, New Tribes Mission, or Misión Nuevas Tribus, was asked to leave the country because we lived and worked in very remote areas in the Amazon jungle. We lived in, my wife and I lived with the Maikititati Indians, a very primitive group of Indians deep in the jungle, and there was a lot of mission groups, missionaries living in Venezuela at the time. We worked with the Yanomamo Indians, the Piaroa, the Paimon, the Pume, the Mako, and so the government at that time thought that we were spying on the country, living in these very remote areas. And
what could be gained by spying from within a very primitive tribe that has very little contact with the modern world?
That's right.
It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
It really goes to the fact that
we did have airstrips in our villages, a lot of us.
Okay.
Very small airstrips so you could fly 185, 206s into. So they were like wondering about that, the airstrips, and we're bringing
smuggling things in and out.
things in and out, and we're spying on the country, and it was foolishness. But if you tell the people a lie long enough, what happens?
Oh, they start to believe it.
They start to believe it.
I don't know if I've discussed it with you, but the KGB did a study back in the 60s. Right, it's a famous study where they were able to brainwash people for about 3 to 4 weeks, for a very short period of time.
Wow.
And then after that, after the bombardment of lies, they did it on purpose. There was no amount of truth, there was no amount of fact and evidence that you could give to somebody after they've believed a lie for so long that would bring them back from that.
Wow.
And so, I think that goes to what you were saying.
And that's what happened.
You tell the lie enough times, and folks will not be able to come back from it.
Yeah, the Venezuelan people, beautiful people. It was a fantastic country. It was the second most wealthy country in the Western Hemisphere at one time. The people are awesome. It's a great country. It can be a great country again. It wasn't then. It was the government that just kept telling the people lies about who we were and why we were there. And if you think about it, it makes sense. What would possess you to go and live in the middle of the Amazon jungle with a very primitive group of Indians? What would possess you to leave this and go to the jungle? They must have an ulterior motive. That's the way they think.
Right.
And so you can't just do it because you love God and you care for people. They think you must have an ulterior motive. So that, it makes sense why they kicked us out. And they kept telling the people that we were stealing water, we were stealing gold and diamonds. Very wealthy country as far as gold and diamonds go. We were stealing all these natural resources, oil, from the country. And so they asked us to leave. So that brought me back to New England and another primitive part of the world. I like saying that when I'm sharing with people. I do a lot of preaching.
It's like the Hekawi Indians.
Yeah, with the Hekawi.
With the Hekawi. They had to move out of Massachusetts because the Pilgrims just ran the neighborhood down.
That's right. I do remember that episode. But yes, I do make that as a joke. But I think God, in His plan, knew what He was doing. He always does when He moves people around. And I found myself back on my doorstep in Massachusetts after being with New Tribes Mission for 20 years, and 14 of which were in Venezuela. And I said to God, why? Why am I back in New England? And the Lord really simply said, through the counsel of many, Walter, continue doing what you've always done until I move you again. I'm like, okay, Lord, what? And God wanted me to come back and work with my people, my culture, my language. And because New England, I don't know if you know this, it's the least religious part of the country, okay? There was a Pew study done, and Vermont came in the least religious state in the Union. Out of 50 states...
Okay, I can believe Vermont.
Okay.
No, I really can.
Okay.
I mean, that's Burlington, Bernie Sanders. The progressive attitude. You know, the progressiveness of Vermont just speaks to it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and that's
so they push it.
progressiveness is anti-Christian as far
Yeah.
as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
it is.
It's anti-Christian and anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Yes, and that too. And Massachusetts came in second, least religious state in the Union. New Hampshire and Massachusetts actually came in tie, second and third place, but the least religious states in the Union. Maine came in number 4th, least religious state in the Union. Rhode Island came in number 5, least religious state in the Union. Believe it or not, our shining light is Connecticut, which came in number 11.
Okay, that's surprising.
Number 11.
And where's New Hampshire?
It was second.
Okay.
So second and third, right in between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So yes.
I'm surprised. I would have thought that Massachusetts would have fared better with all the Irish Catholics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you know, we have that.
Yep, that's true. That is true. But according to the Pew,
Stereotype, I
this
suppose.
Pew
Yeah.
Story survey, so there's a lot of work to be done here as far as Christianity and growth. And New Englanders in general, all New Englanders are fiercely independent people. They rely heavily on their intelligence and their money. And so when you have higher education, you have higher financial value, then you tend to put God out of your life. I don't need God. I don't need religion. I don't need religious people. And that's where the anti-Semitism comes in.
Right.
The hatred for, why the hatred for Israel? Why? This
Right.
little tiny piece of property in the Mideast. I mean, you don't hear that about Scotland. You don't hear that about Finland.
Right.
You hear about Israel. Why? Because they're God's people. That's why. The Bible says you're always going to be hated. They'll
Right.
always be hated.
Right. I mean, it was prophesied.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, this business, I don't know, we can...
Getting back to the prison ministry.
Let's get back to that real quick.
Prison ministry is not something that I said, okay, yeah, I want to do something like that. It fell into my lap. A friend of mine who was a missionary to New Guinea, she called me one day, Karen, and she asked if I would bring some books to the prison library, drop them off at the library, Christian books, church books. I'm like, sure, I'll go by, and so I'll meet the chaplain in the parking lot. So I went to MCI Concord in Concord, Massachusetts, and to drop these books off, I met the pastor, and the pastor said, hey, would you like to come inside the prison and give your testimony? You lived in the Amazon jungle. The guys would probably be interested in hearing what you have to say. And would you like to come in and give your testimony to the guys? We called it the church behind the wall. And I said, no, thank you. I spent half my life trying to stay out of prison. I didn't want to go in there. But he talked me into it, and I was so scared. I was in fear and trembling. Like,
Is it just, was the fear initially, is it just preconception about the people that you were going to be surrounded by?
yeah,
Violent criminals or
exactly.
and so it was all internalized fear.
Yeah, you know, it's like people fearing the Amazon jungle. You know, I mean, you got to have a little bit of fear going into the middle of the Amazon.
Oh yeah.
And so
Until you experience the unknown, you don't know.
And we fell in love with it.
Right.
We loved it. We had a mud hut, grass roof. We had some solar panels on our grass roof, and we loved the life in the jungle with the people. Very quiet, no contact with the outside world except through ham radio. And going into Concord, MCI Concord was the same way. You know, you fear, like, what are you going to see? What are you going to hear? You know, are these guys going to attack me? You know, I'm not that big of a guy. And, you know, will I have protection? And, you know, what are they going to say? What if they ask me difficult questions? You know, so you have those fears.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with it. The chaplain was awesome, Dave Renner. He's a very close friend now. And him and I just hit it off really well, and we minister together there as Protestants. We have a Catholic chaplain, Protestant chaplain, Dave Renner, and then a Muslim chaplain. And so we work with the different religious groups in the prison. Falling in love with the ministry and just getting to know the guys one-on-one. You know, when you go in, you have all these political, you know, views of the world, you know, and it's like, oh, this is what I would say, this is what I would say. But I like to tell people, you know, until you know a rapist or murderer and you've sat down with him and talked with him and his life has changed and he's reading the Bible with you and he's crying for the pain that he's caused in this world, all of a sudden, you know, these, you know, hard, fast rules like, oh, we should, you know, fry them all, you know, kill them all. They deserve to die in prison, you know, and you have these political views. But then when you meet these people face to face, and you start seeing that they're broken people. Yes, they're broken. I'm not excusing what they did, but we're all broken people. We've all done horrible things. In fact, the Bible says, if you've looked at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery. If you've thought raka in your heart, which means you fool, if you thought that in your heart, you've committed murder. Those are pretty tough rules. And so you all of a sudden you're not as judgmental anymore. Yes, I understand what they did was horrible, but all of a sudden you can actually enjoy these guys and become close friends with them. So it's a different life.
Right.
And you understand why they're in prison for life. That's okay. You know, they're paying their debt to society that way. It's the same thing with all the Latins that are coming over our border. You know, I'm not talking about all the different ethnic groups, but the Latins, because I'm pretty close to many Latins. I lived in Venezuela for many years. And so now when I go to Walmart or I go to the store, I can speak Spanish and talk to them. If they're talking in line, I can carry on a conversation with them, or I'll talk to the kids or whatever. We can be so hard and fast, you know, it's like, oh, they're coming over the border and, you know, we ship them all back, and you get really hard in your own heart towards these people until you get to know them. And all of a sudden, it's like, you know what? Oh, that Latin family, they're a nice family. Oh, that's a good group. You know what I'm saying?
No, I
not so hard fast.
I absolutely understand it,
Judgmental.
and those types of revelations have come to me in speaking with people. It's like, you know, I may have judged too harshly, but at the same time, in general, we do. I'm not going to get into the whole border thing, but we do have a problem with the migration.
That's true.
Coming north. I mean, the problem isn't at a personal level, it's at a national level.
Good
right?
point. That's a good way of saying it.
It doesn't mean that I don't have empathy for these folks who are trying to escape and trying to find a better life. It just means that we have a system that's broken somehow, right? And, you know, I always go back, you know, like, oh, the border wall is racist, the border wall. I don't think so. I really do buy into what Trump had said. He said it a few years ago. The wall doesn't mean that you're not welcome. The wall means use the door. Use the door instead of breaking down our window. That's what it means.
I get it.
So,
I worked really hard to stay in Venezuela. I had to go through all those hoops. I had to go to customs. I had to go and have my passport, you know, visas put into my passport every year. And I had to leave the country every couple of years and come back into the country.
In order to expire and renew the visas.
Exactly. It was a system. And so I believe in border security for countries. Every country in the world has it, I believe. But you said something interesting, and you said it's a problem, a large problem in our country. Whereas, how'd you word that? But it's not on the personal level.
Yes, absolutely not on a personal level.
It's on a government level.
And from my view, I mean, that's exactly the way the people I speak with feel about it. That this isn't personal.
It's not personal.
This is
good point.
And we can't act as though it is, but we're being lambasted by the media and the other side, who are claiming and lying and telling the world that we think it's personal, and
Right.
it's
Good
not
point.
personal.
Right.
And there's a, like you said, there's a very distinct difference there, you know, and it's those types of relationships that you've created in prison with people who, you know, I'm sure that you've run the gambit from the white collar criminals to the very violent criminals. But what I was going to say, you've developed a relationship with them. They are people. And so when you have that vision, you have that relationship with them. That's the type of openness, open-mindedness that allows you to say, "Hey, wait a minute, right? They're behind bars. They're paying their debt to society. I don't know if you agree, but some of them really should be behind bars and should stay behind bars."
Yeah.
And then you get to the next discussion is things like capital punishment, right? And so the question is capital punishment something that we should have? Should some of these people be facing that capital punishment? And does that interfere with the other part of our faith in that all lives are sacred, right?
Well, the thing is
the
that
right
we
to
have
life and the
Right.
things like that, right? So it really does create a conflict there.
It does. In your heart, in my heart, it creates a conflict. We have a system, we have a government that is in charge of those decisions. All we can do is vote.
Right.
And make our voices heard, right? Like Martin Luther King Jr., you know, he was very vocal about the issues that he was facing in those days. Very vocal, and he had peaceful marches. And when he did do something stupid, he wasn't afraid to say, you know, I shouldn't have done that. And I shouldn't have got angry, or I shouldn't have.
And there's something that we don't see out of modern day politicians either.
right.
Is wait a minute, you know, now that I've been shown something, now that I've seen this, now that I've experienced that, you know, I can honestly say that I have to rethink my position,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
And of course you're called a flip flopper.
Yep.
You know, oh, they're always changing their position. Well, you know, the intelligent mind does adapt
Yep.
to new information.
Yep, absolutely. And the thing is, the way I look at things, Joshua, is there's nothing I can do about the wall. There's nothing I can do about what goes on in Washington. I was not born into that. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility, according to the Bible, is to pray. We're supposed to pray for our government officials for peace in the land. We are to make our voices for those who cannot speak for themselves, the Bible says, for the unborn. They can't speak for themselves, so we are to create, we are to be the voice for them. The elderly, the underprivileged, the poor. We're supposed to be the voice, according to the Bible. And I'd like to just say there's an organization in Massachusetts called Clearway, and it's a nonprofit. It's the only licensed medical center in Massachusetts that is pro-life. And so the reason why I bring them up is I was on their board for 6 years. The reason why I bring them up is because I see a problem, and it's nothing that I'm great or I'm special. I'm not. But I have a heart for the unborn. I have a heart for for the abortion issue. And so I am investing time and energy into helping in that cause. That's all I can do.
Right.
The Latins and the who are here illegally, and the issues when that plane, remember when the plane landed in Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah.
All right? They were all Venezuelans on that plane. Okay? So I'm driving home, I'm 495, you know, I'm just driving home, and I hear that on the radio, a plane landed in Martha's Vineyard. filled with Venezuelans, and I'm like, oh, and who sent them up here from Florida, right? Ron.
Was it Florida? Yeah, it was Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, DeSantis. And so I'm like, oh my word, a plane full of Venezuelans just landed in Martha's Vineyard, So I couldn't wait to get home. So I get home, and I immediately go online, and I'm looking for churches on Martha's Vineyard. And I called a couple, and I said, look, I speak Spanish. Is there anything I can do?
There you go.
I will drive down there, get on the ferry, go to Martha's Vineyard. I will interpret or help or anything.
It doesn't matter what your position is on it. You volunteered
Right.
to help the situation.
That's what the Bible tells us as humans to do, to help one another, to be there for other people. There's nothing I can do about Washington. There's nothing I can do about the wall. There's nothing I can do about,
But
all these other
there's a group of
issues.
people here who you have something in common with. You've lived in their country for 20 years. Yeah.
So I'm just giving those examples. It's like the prison, there's not much I can do about the crime rate. But what I can do is I can go and volunteer time to help that these criminals, the ones that do get out of prison, don't come back.
Right.
So that's my little bit
And
in
that
society.
really needs to be the goal, right?
Yeah, it should be.
I mean, well, that should be part of the goal. I mean, goal number
Absolutely.
one is faith, and goal number two needs, when you do leave here, hopefully Walter has made an impact, enough of an impact, or at least part of the impact that prevents them from coming back.
Yep.
That's-
And I've seen that. And I've seen other guys that have not come back. I had one gentleman in my Bible study in prison, a great guy, very quiet, very attentive, cared about others, helped set up chairs, things like that. And he got out of prison. And immediately, I think it was just a few weeks, he was shot dead by police officers in here in Massachusetts, or there in Massachusetts. And I went into chapel that next week, and I said to the guys, I'm really sorry to hear about what happened. And one guy said, oh yeah, suicide by cop. And I was like, what? And he said, suicide by cop. It's very common. I didn't know what it meant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but when these guys get out, they're so desperate. They have nothing. They have no driver's licenses. They have no money in the bank. They've burnt all their bridges with their families. They have nobody to help them get on their feet, and so it's just easy to go back behind the wall, commit a crime,
Right.
or just take your life.
We see that a lot in different aspects of life. Like we talk about veterans a lot on this show, and folks will retire or leave the military, and they'll go from this very controlled
Yeah.
life where they're following rules, they're following orders, and they're on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Some of them are getting shot at, some of them are shooting back. But then they leave that life and they try to integrate back into normal society.
Right.
And things just don't go well.
Right.
And so we highlight a lot of programs for veterans, to help them transition back in. Veterans
That's
who
excellent.
like last week our guest was Liberty House. It's a veterans sober home.
Yeah.
But it's not just it. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, don't most prison systems have, I mean, obviously there's the ministry you're volunteering for, but are there other programs that help them transition back out if they've been in for a long period of time? Education.
There are education programs.
There's always, we hear about transition housing where folks are on work release,
Yeah, they're all
during
full.
probation.
There's not enough.
I mean,
They're full.
that's the type of program that this particular
The Liberty House
should have.
does, or?
Again, Liberty House is veterans
for veterans.
only.
Oh,
but,
okay.
But
Right.
your suicide by cop friend,
Yeah.
that's the type of program that may have helped him.
Yeah, absolutely. One of
Are
the
you aware of programs like that
I
maybe you
am.
can help
I am,
get them
and,
connected as they leave?
and we
or-
do that, but they're full. All the halfway houses just are packed. They just don't have the facilities to handle the amount of people that get out of prison. It's a sad state of affairs, but people have put so much. Again, the prison system is a political system, whereas the amount of beds that are full are what the money that comes in.
Right.
And so if they keep the beds full, more money from the coffers come in to maintain that facility. That's one problem. Another problem is, I think the bottom line is that people don't care about those who get out of prison. People don't care about, sometimes for the vets who are suffering, PTSD and those other things. People don't care. The Bible says an interesting thing. It says, in the end days, the love of many will grow cold. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the days where people just don't care about others. And it's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, I brought some examples, and they're just most of them are just headlines. Target apologizes and rehires a woman who was fired for putting a Christian message on her name tag. She had written "Trust in Jesus" on her name tag, right? And she got fired for it, right? The Football Association, this is in the UK, will remind players of rules over religious messaging after he played with the words "I love Jesus" on his armband. Interestingly enough, he wrote the words "I love Jesus" on his LGBT armband that the league forced them to wear. We're starting to see that. You know, the football, baseball, they're all having these LGBT days where they're forcing players to wear uniforms that are sending a political message that they don't agree with. And then the players who go ahead and wear those uniforms but don't agree with them, they then write these messages on their uniforms, and they're being fined and or punished for those messages, yet they're being forced to advocate for something else.
Well, you know, the thing about the LGBT...
But we're seeing, I'm not harping on LGBT. What I'm saying is that we're seeing these types of anti-religious, anti-Christian things go on. Like in October, Kamala Harris had a rally in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And there was a member of her audience that said out loud, "I love Jesus." And do you remember what Kamala's response was?
Yeah,
she says, "You're in the wrong place."
Yeah.
And had security remove this woman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have an entire political left. We have an entire political party, an entire administration. Our government we're supposed to be the beacon of religious freedom on the planet.
Religious freedom.
And here we are, we have the Vice President of the United States saying, "You're in the wrong place."
Yeah.
This sentiment around this world, this "I don't care" sentiment, this is just getting out of hand. And it's all over the world.
Yeah. Well, the Bible also says that in those days, the last days, you will be hated by everyone. And so people hate Christians even if they don't know them or know anything about them. And they hate Jews, Israelites. And even though they don't know them, and they don't even know why they hate them. All this pro-Palestinian things going on in our world right now, in our country right now. The issue is that, spiritually speaking, people are going to dislike and hate the people of God, whether they be Christian or Jew, and not even know why they do. They blame us, like in World War II, they blame the Jews. That's the issue. It's a spiritual issue. And as our country moves away from the things of God, we're going to see a deeper, darker spiritual force moving in and taking over the lives of our children, the minds of our youth, and that's what we're seeing happening. It's a sad state of affairs.
It is.
But if you were to look in the days that we're living in, the signs, you know, it says here in the book of Matthew It says, and Jesus answered and said to them, see to that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened of those things. Those things must take place, and that is not yet the end. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines, earthquakes. But all these things are merely bringing forth birth pains, and they will turn you over to tribulation, and they'll kill you. And you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Whose name? The name of Jesus. You'll be hated. And at that time, many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and will mislead many, because lawlessness is increased and most people's love will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. That's the days we're living in.
I guess I don't disagree. You know, this business of turning cold to things definitely need to change. You know, it would be nice if we could turn it around. It would be nice if folks can acknowledge that this is, like I said earlier, the beacon of religious freedom in the world, and that there wouldn't be discrimination, at least within our borders. You know, we're seeing favoritism to one religion or another, and we're seeing folks just ignore it. There was, I think it was this Easter, it was either this Easter or last Easter, a busload of Christians fell off a cliff in South America. They were headed to church on Easter. And the headline that CNN put in was, 45 Easter worshipers die in bus crash. What's an Easter worshiper? CNN refused to call them Christians. They're even taking it out of our language, right? And when you see a headline like that, you're supposed to not notice that the headline itself is misleading you.
Yeah.
It's lying to you, right? There's no such thing as an Easter worshiper. These are Christians on their way to church.
Yep.
And that is scary, that it's infecting our language, it's infecting our lives, it's infecting our children, you know, and unfortunately, you know, I'm not immune from this, right? I mean, you know, our children, I spend my life trying to give my children more than what I had growing up, right? It's what every parent does. I'm going to make sure that my child doesn't go through this thing that I went through. I'm going to make sure that my child doesn't want for anything. If I can provide it, I will provide it. And as a result, we may have overdone it. I feel like, right, you allow your children to play new things like violent video games and watch violent movies, and so, and as we go generation to generation, that violence and that lack of respect for life, because you're bombarded with it in movies and TV and news cycle. You're bombarded with it. You are desensitized to it, and our children are much more desensitized to this than we are. And my children are adults, right? And then their children are going to be even worse off with this desensitization to what is morally right and wrong.
The thing is again, bringing it back to you and your own responsibility before God and your family, your job. You know, there's nothing I can do about what's going on in the world. There's nothing I can, little Walter Muty in Berlin, Massachusetts, there's nothing I can do. I can pray, which I do, all right? But I can change the life that's around me. I can help the poor. It says in Matthew chapter 25, this is Judgment Day, and everybody's going to hear this, all right? Because this is prophecy that it's going to happen. It's Judgment Day. It's found in the book of Matthew chapter 25. And And it says that Jesus is going to sit on his glorious throne, and he's going to divide the sheep from the goats. He's going to put the goats on his left and the sheep on his right. And he's going to say to the sheep, well done, good and faithful servants. Come in to my eternal rest and enjoy my Father's presence, all right? And because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I was in prison, you visited me. And the righteous, and all of us are going to actually see this happen, because this is prophecy. We're going to see this happen in Judgment Day. And the righteous are going to say, those on the right, the sheep, are going to say, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you in prison or in the hospital and visit you? And Jesus is going to say, inasmuch as you've done it to these, the least of my brethren, you've done it to me. So every time you visit those who are in the hospital, those who are in prison, you give clothes to the naked and water to the thirsty and food to the hungry, you are actually serving. This is how we show God we love him. What's the number one commandment? Everybody knows the number one commandment. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. Well, how do you do that? You can't see God. Where is God? So God has given us each other. So in order for me to love God with all my heart, my soul, my mind, my strength, it's by loving those around me. And then he's going to say to those I would like to say a shout out to a friend, Mark, who's in the hospital, and he's pretty sick right now. We're praying for him that he gets well. So Mark, if you're watching this, we're praying for you, buddy. And then he's going to say, Jesus is going to say to those on his left, the goats, he's going to say, when I was hungry, you didn't give me food. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me drink. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was a stranger, you didn't invite me in. While I was in the hospital or in the prison, you didn't come to visit me. And they're going to say, when did we see you that way? And he says, very interesting, he says, inasmuch as you did not do it to the least of my brethren, you didn't do it to me. So my responsibility, our responsibility as human beings, is to minister to one another. That's how we show God we love him. This is what Christmas is all about. When Jesus came and gave his life, he gave his life for us so that we could have a relationship with the Father forever. That is the beautiful picture of Christmas, because he gave first. We love God because he first loved us. And that's basic 101, the gospel message. Jesus Christ died for me because I could not make myself right to stand before a holy and righteous God. God is holy and righteous. There's nothing I can do, little Walter, in order to make myself right. So Jesus died to pay for my sin so that I can stand before God holy and righteous. And now that I know him and I love him, I show that by loving you and loving those on the street and loving those in prison. I can only do what I can do, my little tiny life, just like every one of us. But if we were all involved in helping, we would see our culture change if we truly cared for others.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think I've told you this before. Whenever something is taking place in my family and the people around me, folks come to me for answers, right? And I don't have all the answers, but I try to help, right? But I always say exactly what you've said. You know, now's not the right time, right? It's not our turn. Like if something happened, there's nothing we can do about that. Mm-hmm. All we can do is take care of ourselves right now. We can provide for ourselves. Yeah. And the next turn, you know, we'll be able to do something later, yep. Right? You know, if we take it in a context of, say, a court action or news cycle or something like that. Okay, something happened. I can't change that. Mm-hmm. What I can do is I can look to the next step, right? Mm-hmm. It's not my turn yet when it comes to, say, a legal action, yep. All right? I can't say, there's nothing I can do about it until I next end up in the courtroom and I'm standing in front of the judge and I say something. The same goes with any type of family situation, any type of financial situation, right? You get a letter in the mail that there's a collection, right? Or a letter in the mail that says, hey, you're being brought to small claims court, or you're laid off from your job. Okay, it's over. Yelling and screaming about it now and making the people around you miserable is not going to do it. All you can do is, okay, we got to start from where we know, from where we are, and then move forward. And that means helping each other and not obsessing over this gigantic picture, like you said, that we can't control.
Right. So are we, the little life that I can control, my little tiny life, with my wife and my 4 boys and my 10 grandchildren now, can I minister in their lives? Can I minister in the lives of my neighbors? Can I minister in the lives of, that God brings these people into my life? And how can I be, I can't do it all. I can only do what, like you just said, what my circle, my small life. The problem, this is my, one of my pet peeves with the media. The problem with the media is we're so inundated with information now that you can get frustrated or angry, and for no reason at all. You just find yourself getting angry. I was at the
I am guilty of it. I'm guilty of watching the news and getting angry. And I'm the only person in the room.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
I'm getting angry about this video feed from halfway around the planet. So.
Yeah, I preached a sermon. It didn't go well, but I preached a sermon in a church, and I said, these people who just sit behind TVs day in and day out, they just fill themselves up with anger. And I gave the example that I was at the Toyota dealership waiting for my truck to be repaired, and I saw all these people sitting there and in front of a TV that was 80 inches size, and they're all just like staring at this screen, and I'm like, I wonder what's going on. I had my laptop and I had my notes. I was writing a sermon. And I'm like, what's so important on the TV that all these people are just like glued to it? So I went over, I sat down, and I'm like, it's just the news. And they said, oh, there's a 883-pound great white shark off the Onset Beach down at Cape Cod. And I'm thinking to myself, how do they know it's 883 pounds? Did they weigh it? Did they catch it and weigh it? It was just, see, I don't watch TV and I don't watch the news. And so when I do see it, I'm very sensitive to it.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm better because I don't do it. Don't get me wrong. It's just something I've chosen to pull myself out of, and I'll tell you why. Okay, but I've pulled myself away from the TV. And then it talked about 2 dogs dying in a fire in Chicago, and I'm like, so what? I don't live in Chicago. Why do I need to hear about what's going on in a fire in Chicago? I don't even, it's not part of my life. And then you hear about these issues around our country, and those were a couple, and there was a couple other ones, and I wrote these things down. And I walked away from that, and I just realized that all that information is given us to create fear. They're trying to find something in your life that will trigger you. If the dog thing didn't trigger you, then maybe the shark thing will trigger you. But if the shark thing doesn't trigger you, because you don't even go to the beach, I don't care about a great white shark down Onset Beach. I don't care about 2 dogs in Chicago. They're going to find something else that will trigger you. And there's a reason for that, because they want you to continue to watch their program and be pulled into it.
Watch the commercials and the money and the conflict. Yep. And
that's why I stopped watching.
We've talked about this on the show in a number of different situations, in that the media has spent the last 50 years at least, if not more, refining the ability to divide, right? Yep. Everything has to be controversial. There's not a single news story that isn't designed to either create fear or cause controversy or cause a divide between you and your ideals and someone else's ideals. everything is meant to 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 divide you.
Right.
And we've moved from this situation where we used to be amicable with each other, even if you didn't agree on political issues or social issues or anything like that, or economic issues. We used to be amicable with each other. And I use this example a lot. You know, Speaker of the House, Democrat Tip O'Neill, used to smoke cigars and drink beer with the president, Republican Ronald Reagan, right? They were friends. They were friendly. They didn't hate each other, right? When they go into work, they have different views, and you work something out. Whereas we fast forward 40 years, and you had Speaker of the House, Democrat Nancy Pelosi, and President Republican Donald Trump for those 4 years that were just at each other, and you had to hate each other, otherwise you weren't doing your job right. And we had to pick a side every time we watched the news. Right? And so anyway.
So the division is caused by Satan himself, the devil. We have an enemy. A lot of people don't believe, in the devil or spiritual world, but once you live in the Amazon jungle, you realize that there is a spiritual world out there. But one reason, go ahead.
You talk about the spiritual world. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but you talk about the spiritual world, and that reminds me of a story. I don't think you told it last year, but you've told it before, about the spiritual world from your tribe's perspective. Where you walked into, or you or a fellow minister of yours walked into the
village.
The village.
Yeah, and they knew he was coming.
And the not only did they know that he was coming, but the witch doctor, up and took off.
Yeah. I have a good friend who worked with the Paimon and Indians, and before he ever showed up in the village, the witch doctor knew he was coming, and that he was going to have things written down, which they're not really they don't understand writing. But there was going to be something on this banana leaf for you to listen to. And so the witch doctor knew, and he shares it with the village. The witch doctor is the most powerful man in the village. And so, but they're also some of the first ones that become Christians because they understand the spiritual world. When you talk about spirits here in the United States, people think, gee, you're getting religious on us, Walter, or you're a whack job. But to people around the world, they understand there's a spiritual world around us. If somebody is spiritually possessed in our country, we shoot them up with drugs and we put them in a mental institution. So we don't see it as much. In Venezuela, they're on the street. And so you see the possession of people. And I've been attacked. I know what it feels like to be in the presence of evil. So it's not unfamiliar to me. The witch doctors have a lot of power, and they pretty much dictate what's going to happen in the village. Our witch doctor, Ichoka, who was my wife's grandfather, you become part of the family there. He was right there at all the Bible studies, listening to Matt Cochran and Fran Cochran, my coworkers. They were teaching God's Word, the Bible, and Ichoka was there, listening, because he understood that the power that's in you is more powerful than that's in me. They understand that. That's the spiritual world we live in. And we're going to see it someday. This body has to die. See, this is why we have death, is because of sin. We have broken God's holy laws, and we are physically have to die. That is God's grace, so that we won't be stuck in these bodies forever.
So
you
tell
look
me.
Like you had a question.
Oh no, I'm listening. So tell us what the tribe's reaction was when you and your wife put up a Christmas tree.
Yeah, the Christmas. We really, Jane and I struggled culturally because you don't want to bring something into a culture that you don't know how they're going to react to it. Even though a Christmas tree for Jane and I is simply a reminder of beautiful times as growing up as children, you know, presents and lights and Christmas bulbs and stuff like that. It's part of our culture. It's part of the joy of our culture. It's something we do. Every culture has something in their culture that they enjoy. And so we really struggled with trying to make a decision whether or not we were going to put up a Christmas tree, because we are their TV. The Indians are always looking in the screens of our house because they watch us and they think we're really funny people. They make fun of us because we try to eat balancing food on these metal things, you know,
As opposed to just picking it up.
picking it up and eating it. So with their entertainment, and they watch us and look in the screens and talk about us and laugh, so when we put up the Christmas tree, we closed our curtains at first so that they really couldn't see it, because we knew that unwanted questions were going to come up, you know, which they did. And eventually we just told them that in our village, the village that we come from, this is a way that we have fun together as families. There was no spiritual significance to it. That comes much later.
I gotcha.
And
You
so,
have to start slowly with introducing them
to our culture,
customs.
like drinking.
Yeah.
I could tell you some stories, but drinking milk. Where does milk come from? It comes from a cow. So, and then they start questioning, well, what's a cow? So you tell them it's an animal that lives in our village. And so it just brings you into this
Right. Yeah.
many unanswerable questions. So.
Well, Walter, I want to thank you.
Time is almost up.
It is almost up. I want to thank you for coming every year and being our Christmas show.
Thank you for
we
inviting me.
replay it for a couple of weeks because we take a break, and you always bring some good insight and some humbling insight. You know, because like I said, I'm not innocent of any of all of this, right? I'm guilty of raising my children a certain way. I'm guilty of having that hardening in the heart, right? This show every year kind of brings it back, right? It helps me to think about those things. And like I said, it's part of why it's one of my favorite shows. This season where like I said, we have the Liberty House and we talk about all the programs that are available for homeless and vets and things like that.
I appreciate the work that Liberty House does. I don't know anything about them, but my son is a vet, and he fought in Afghanistan, and I've seen some of the struggles that he's gone through. And he grew up in a very strict Christian environment.
And that's really the mission of Liberty House is folks who need that assistance. They need that transition. They need that sober living.
Yeah.
I think she said they have 18 residents at the moment, and they're going to expand into a larger facility here soon. But the whole point is that once they've accepted a resident to go through the program with them, you are living and working with folks who have had similar experiences. They have something in common to start with. It's not government funded. It's absolutely Christian based. It's a program of Catholic Charities, and that's what people need when they need to recover and they need to. When they need help.
I get that. And my son has special connections with other vets, and I see that as a father, as a dad, I see that. And I know how when he connects with other veterans, it's a blessing to him because they have similar struggles, feelings that I don't have. I didn't go through it.
All right, Walter.
Thank you.
I want to thank you.
God bless.
I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas.
And we will see you in our first show of the new year.